Hello there, sword friends. I am going to do a quick review on a Citadel Bamboo Katana, and if you don't want to listen to me ramble on about what I like and don't like, the nitty-gritty of it is that I like it. I think it's a fantastic sword, and you should buy one or two, but not 100, because I think that's all they made. If you don't really want to listen to why I like it, then fine, you can stop watching here. But if you do, I'm going to hopefully elaborate and do justice as to why I think this is a very good product, and some things that I didn't necessarily like about it, but by and large, very positive, and that's what you'll hear me say. Now, the things that you need to note before I get into the nitty-gritty: this is a Citadel Bamboo Katana that I purchased secondhand. I didn't buy it from CAS Iberia, which is the distributor, or Citadel directly. I got it from a third party. It was in pretty new condition, so I think it's pretty representative of what you would get if you were to buy one in new shape, but know that it is a secondhand piece, so that comes with some, well, preconceived notions about you can't blame everything on the distributor or manufacturer. The other thing to note is that this is a limited run sword from Citadel or CAS Iberia, so by the time you get around to watching it, it may not be available anymore, there may not be any left in stock anywhere, or they might have completely new, different, cooler models available. But I think most of the things that I like about this sword, especially if I reflect on the Citadel Lotus review I did some time ago, we'll put a link in the description below, is that Citadel does a pretty good job on kind of nailing down the little details that a lot of people miss. And so while their products are expensive and not necessarily frivolous in terms of the feature sets that you get, what you do get is a really refined, good, solid performance on all of the little way things are supposed to connect to one another, and the general assembly and the fit and finish is really, really good. And I'm very, very pleased with that, and I think that by far this is the closest thing to a custom sword. When I say custom, for preface, what I'm saying is not like a mass production sword. I mean a sword that individually one person made each piece by hand, at one time, not mass production pieces. There's a lot of companies out there where you can pick a general type of sword, pick some colors, and they use pre-made fittings and assemble it all, and that's kind of a mass customization type thing. If you're a supply chain nerd like me, that's something called mass customization. Like your computer, you might go online and you pick the bits and bobs for your computer and they assemble it and ship it out to you. Or cars or many other things work like that. Sandwiches work like that. I'm going way off topic from swords. The point is, when I say a custom sword, what I mean is one smith made one sword at one time. They heat treated one at one time. They carved out the fittings and the finishes and all of that, and they polished it one at a time. And it's not necessarily to say, not using power tools, but one person paid attention to everything meticulously, doing it individually, kind of one at a time, and that's the general idea of custom. And this is as close to that as I have seen from a production company. Now, admittedly, the production process seems very akin to the way custom swords are made, and they're just making a lot of them that look very similar to make a series, but nevertheless, I would say this is the closest to a custom sword that I've gotten. Now, it is not really inexpensive. It's $2,800, $2,700, somewhere in that ballpark is what the brand new sword costs. And for that, you do get like a sword bag, and you get, you get a sword, and it's pretty, but you don't really get a whole lot of anything for that price in terms of additional accessories or something like that. And $2,800 can get you a lot of different swords. This is among the highest price custom swords that are available in the market today. Realistically, it gives you a lot, but know that it is among the more expensive. At $2,700 or $2,800, you're looking at the very upper thresholds of what mass-produced swords are in terms of the competition, and at the same time, you're looking at kind of the lower or basic side of what modern smiths can produce at a custom level. A lot of times they start a little bit higher than this, but I've sold swords that are brand new and custom made for $2,000. So you could find a custom made sword at a very similar price. So that's the general competition, but overall, I'm very happy with this, and now I'm going to blab on about why. Before we go too far into the deep end, what I am going to share is the measurements, and the measurements are a comparison between my online measurements that I've found from the Hanwei website or CAS Iberia website, as well as the measurements I took directly from the blade I had. And what I'm going to note are a couple things that are a little bit askew, and this blade has quite a bit more variation than most production blades. I suppose that's a bit of a testament to the fact that it's a handmade blade. and kind of individually crafted, because these kind of variations are not that uncommon when you go into the realm of custom type swords. So first off, the ska, or the handle, is 11.25 inches, and what that means is it's about a quarter inch longer than expected. And the blade, most notably, is 28.5 inches, and that measurement is taken from the tip of the blade to the hamanchi, or where the hibaki starts. So it does not include the hibaki. Again, emphatically, it does not include the hibaki, which means I have no idea where 27.75 inches comes to bear in terms of what is shown on the website. This one is 3/4 of an inch longer, and that means that, well, basically it's quite a bit longer. And if I include the hibaki, that adds about another 1.25 inches, as the hibaki is a little bit longer than the average hibaki. The sori is also deeper, which adds to the length of the blade, if you will, or the mass that's included to give you that length with that level of curvature. Moto haba and saki haba, that's the measurement of the base of the blade width-wise, and the base of the blade, or the width of the blade, at the kasaki, at the yakote line where the kasaki starts. Moto kasane, sake kasane, those are measurements of the thickness of the blade, again near the hibaki, and at that same yakote line where the kasaki starts, or where the tip begins. Now, the weight of the blade that I have is 2 pounds 9 ounces, which is a full 6 ounces bigger than what is showed online. Now, 6 ounces might not sound like a lot, but it's a hell of a lot of a difference when you're talking about the difference between an advertised price and what you actually get. That's one of the largest variations that I've seen in any kind of katana ever, in terms of any sword that I measure, between difference as what's advertised and difference in terms of what you actually get. But it's not terribly surprising, given that the blade, or the handle, is a 1/4 inch longer, the blade itself is 3/4 of an inch longer, and the sori is wider. That's a lot more steel in the blade itself, which means that that weight has to go somewhere. The point of balance flows with that, as in it's a full inch further up the blade than what is advertised. Now, the point of balance is advertised at 4.75 inches. I'm assuming that is from the tsuba up, but that is where my measurement is from. It's from the tsuba up, and I have that at 5.75. The MSRP of this blade is $27.99. Cult of Athena has it at $27.99, though you may be able to find it advertised or sold for marginally less, whether it be on eBay or some such thing, secondhand, though it does seem to be that this blade is going to cost you about $2,799. So if I start with the general saya, just the outside saya shape, and let's go to the very tippy top here. So this is the kojiri, or just this piece at the end is a piece of horn. And the things I'm looking at when I see this is, one, is the shape even and clean? And in this case, it is. It has a very nice rounded shape to it. This isn't necessarily something that's hard to do, or something you can't find on $200 swords. But the other thing I look at is the transition. Now I can make out that this is horn. It's not necessarily lacquered over. There is a small kind of line here, but I can't dig my fingernail into it. It's hard it doesn't have any cracking or anything like that. It's very smooth to the touch, but I can feel it's there. And that is a mark of craftsmanship. It's even in the way it's supposed to be. The shape of the saya is a little bit wider at the mouth and a little bit narrower at the end. It has a distal taper to the saya itself. Again, something that it's the way it's supposed to be. It's not any thicker than it needs to be. It feels very comfortable in the hand. A lot of times modern sayas tend to be a little bit more overbuilt than this. They're a little thicker and bulgier. People expect them to last forever though too. So these thinner sayas tend not to last for eternity, but at the same time it does feel really nice in my hand, and I haven't had this sword long enough to remark on how long it will or won't last. What I can say though is that the overall craftsmanship seems very good. If I move on to the gloss piece, there's some very minor imperfections in the lacquer, but they are really difficult to see. You kind of have to get up, and I can't even get a photograph of them, but there's a minor texture in this part of the sword that I can kind of feel. But it seems like one pass with some high grit sandpaper would probably bring that down so that it's, matches with the rest of the saya. The gloss is a satin type look. It's a semi-gloss, I think would be the appropriate, in that it shows fingerprints, but not terribly easily. It's a little bit cloudy, so it has a sheeny look, but it's a little cloudy, and your fingerprints don't show up quite as easily as they do on kind of the high gloss pieces. Then you have this Samegawa section here. This is ray skin, and it's been sanded so you don't have a rough texture, and then lacquered over to fill in so you can see the black lacquer filling in the space between all the nodules. What I'd say is that this transition here is perfect. It doesn't have any ledge or anything like that. It's not cracked at all. And now I live in Minnesota. It's pretty hot and humid in the summers and extremely dry and cold in the winters. So I've had this for a while. It's gone through at least a seasonal change here, and I haven't seen any cracking or anything like that, which sometimes they do. The kurigata, this horn piece, is well placed. The kurigata has little brass washers in it. I think they're called shitidome. I pronounce it wrong all the time, but it's hard. It's like shitty-dome. Anyway, they're there. These little pieces can cost a lot of money, and they look handmade. They have some detail in them. And then the other thing I can point to is the seam on the back here. It's present, you can see it, there is a seam, but at the same time it's really difficult to work with Samegawa. It's an irritable substance to manhandle. So to get it to look smooth and nice and even and have this transition look good and the seam to look, at least that it doesn't blare and jump out at you, is a mark to, or a tip of my hat to the people that put it together and knowing what they're doing. It shows that they've practiced and cared about the details. The koiguchi here, this is the mouth of the saya, the opening. Also a horn piece, again the transitions, very smooth. So in terms of craftsmanship, the saya is extremely well done, and all of the little details are nice. Now look at the transition between the koiguchi and the fuchi. So this is where the mouth of the saya and the handle meet, and a lot of times these are bigger, or there's some giant ledge or something like that. In this case, it's not. They're very even all the way around. Again, a detail that is often missed and hard to do, even in custom swords. It's hard to get fittings and stuff together that fit well and give you this kind of seamless transition. It's not something I can often do, but it shows that somebody thought about how the sword should go together and planned it out before they did. I suppose I should show you that it holds the saya well, and the saya holds the hibachi well. It doesn't come out easily. If I show you the suka, the handle is what that means. So there's some interesting notes here. First off, there's not a lot of detail on the fittings themselves. So they are the same kind of handmade, but glossy looking fuchikashira. And they are magnetic. I can show you with my buckyballs here. Here's my magnet. And you can see that the magnets are grabbing on. It's a magnetic substance. So they are made out of some sort of magnetic metal anyway. So they say iron. I'm assuming that that's actually correct. A lot of times people say iron and they're not iron. But if I move on, the ska itself has a very nice shape, a nice kind of hourglass shaping here. The Samegawa is very well done. It doesn't have any large nodules, but it looks like a good clean skin. The Fuchi and Kashira don't have a lot of adornments on them though. And that's something that in a sword in this price category, even the other ocean katana has a little bit of an adornment on the Fuchi and Kashira. This one's just kind of plain Jane. The Ito is nice and tight. It's extremely tight actually. This is probably one of the tightest wraps that I've felt, custom or not. This is an extremely tight. It feels like rock in my hand. It's very tight. And then on the Kashira we have shitidome here. Again, those washer pieces that I mentioned earlier, and the transition between the silk and the fuchi again, and the silk and the kashira, right even Steven, just perfectly aligned. Again, that's something that you have to plan ahead to do. You have to know how thick the silk is and how big your fuchi is, and do some fiddling so that when you wrap it, it comes out seamless and doesn't have a ledge. Oftentimes that's hard for folks to nail down because you have to be accurate to the millimeter in order to really get it as even as this. And they did. It's tight, clean, perfect, well done, great shape, and it doesn't rattle at all. Now there's two makugi in here, and the other thing that I noted, which I forgot to note about the Lotus sword, but I will note with this one, is that when you place the sword, the nakago or the tang into the handle, you can disassemble it for cleaning purposes and whatnot. But when you disassemble this, you can see that the space, the hole in the handle doesn't perfectly line up with the tang of the sword. There's a little bit of a riser there where the hole is drilled, I think slightly below or above The tang of the sword shows up kind of in the bottom portion of the hole, which would mean that the hole is drilled a little bit below where, and the reason for that is that it's supposed to be, again, a small attention to detail that I am very poorly describing. But that means that when you push your hammer in the makugi, these little bamboo pegs, it pushes the nakago down and pulls it in tighter. That's something that is very often missed. It feels like most of the time they take some sort of drill and just press it through the ska. In this case, somebody actually really thought about how things should line up so that it can be taken apart and put back together and maintain its tightness and its overall quality level and finish and be a good user experience for many years to come. And that is, that little detail must take a good amount of time, practice, energy, and craftsmanship to develop and do right. And here, just to see that little stuff means that they care about a lot of avenues of how it's assembled and how it's put together. And there's a lot of things that go into making a good sword that practitioners and people that don't make swords don't understand. So when you see this level of attention to detail, that means they probably care about every aspect of the sword, so you know you're getting a blade that somebody really paid a lot of attention to. The next bit that I will show you is the tsuba, or the guard. Now these are supposedly handmade. It's made out of the same kind of polished iron. It is magnetic, as I showed you before. I like that the edges have a nice gloss sheen that matches, and you can see there's a lot of little indentations and whatnot in the tsuba. It has a nice shape, a lot of carving. These are supposed to be hand carved. So when you look at the level of detail in here, well, it's certainly not like a masterwork Japanese swordsmith from, or Sogu or whoever made these pieces. It does have a lot more detail than your average tsuba does. And you consider that somebody was there making it with a chisel, it makes the level of detail and the overall presentation here a little bit more impressive. At least it does to me. Sometimes people don't care about that stuff, but knowing that somebody made all those little dots with a hand chisel and that this was individually kind of carved out adds quite a bit of character and dimension to me. Now, let's go to the Hibachi. So the Hibachi is larger. I don't know exactly why Citadel makes large Hibachi, though it is a little different, and it's not bad. It's not good or bad, really. It's perfectly fine. I like how they have a bohi, and then the Hibachi has a kind of recessed portion that follows the bohi portion. Not something you see. It could be to keep water out, though it's not common to see that even on historic pieces. It's fine. It's not bad, and it again adds character. The thing I don't like about this that I mentioned on the Lotus as well is that we have a copper Hibachi, we have brass seppa, brass shitadome, and then this kind of iron. There's 3 different types of metal in there, and I don't particularly like that, but that's totally a personal qualm and doesn't really do anything. My eye doesn't inherently jump to one or the other, so it's not bad. It's just a personal preference. Anyway, the Hibachi is a little bit big. It's held by the saya right. The other thing I'll note is that they're off center. The hamachi, moonmachi, that's the kind of little ledge here on either the blade side or the back side where the Hibachi meets the actual steel of the sword and is held in. And they're offset. That's not unhistoric, but a lot of times on custom swords or more refined pieces, they're at the same plane or they're even. These are off center, and I can't necessarily explain why that is. Again, personal preference. It doesn't affect usability of the sword at all, though. Then if you look at the blade, what you can see is a very deep, nice sori. This can make it a little bit weird, and admittedly I had some trouble with this when I was using it, and I'll share that later. But the overall feeling of the blade in hand feels fantastic. It's a great feeling, nimble sword. It doesn't rattle, everything is tight, and I've taken this sword apart a few times now. The blade doesn't have a lot of polish to it, so the polish would be what I would call a basic kind of practitioner's polish, something that you don't have to worry about marring up after you use it, because if you use it, it's going to get scratched, and you didn't invest a lot of time in the polish. Though if you wanted to do a more artful polish on it, I think there's a lot more detail under the steel that would come out if you were to do that. It's got a very nice kisaki. That's the tip of the blade. The Ikote and Kisaki have this kind of weird shape, the same thing that the Lotus did. Now, supposedly there's some reference to this in history. I was unable to find it in any of my research, but if you have information of a point like this being used in a blade, a historic or antique blade, I'd love to see it. Somebody mentioned that this is a historic style, but I certainly have not been able to find it. This little ledge doesn't interfere with you when you're using it, but it is a little bit odd looking. It throws you off a little bit. The bohi, though, is well done. You can see some of the lines on the blade are clean and even. You can see that the bohie has a little bit of wiggle in it. That's pretty common, but overall, very well done blade. The geometry, the shape, the bohie, very well executed. It feels great in the hand. And the other thing to note is the nakago. So a lot of times collectors will look at the nakago of a sword, nakago being the tang of the sword, or the part that fits inside the handle here. And the nakago on this is really well done. A lot of times people don't put any energy into the nakago because they know many of the people that buy the sword are never going to look at it, never disassemble the sword. Or if they do, who cares? It's not a really expensive sword. Here they have a lot of file markings on the sword, which give the nakago a presentation that looks very nice. There's a well done signature and a stamp in the nakago that are legible and easy to understand. If you speak the language, of course. At least I can see the characters are very clearly defined as opposed to muddled in or etched in or something like that. And it said, you know, if you put that much energy into the nakago, the part of the sword that many people will never see, imagine the amount of energy that goes into other aspects of the sword. The steel, how it's hammered out, how it's forged. This is a sword that somebody held in their hand and thought about how it should feel. And that is something that is really difficult to get outside of getting a custom-made, individually done sword. And that's another reason I think these swords are just really top-notch. I mean, they should be for the money, but the fact that they are is good. A lot of swords will charge you, companies will charge you top dollar for things and then not deliver on the promise of what that dollar figure should buy. I think Citadel does. And when I use it, what I would say is that this blade has a stout, kind of hefty presence. It's not dead in my hand. It's easy to move around and control one-handed or two-handed. What I did find was odd is when I was drawing the blade and then doing noto, I couldn't avoid getting this kind of raspy scratch. When I drew the blade, no matter, really what speed I went. And I wonder if it's the Kasaki here, this little ledge, kind of grinding up against the side of the side. I'm not sure, but I always got a kind of noise, and it could be because I'm doing it wrong. But I had a lot of difficulty getting a quiet draw. Then when I was doing noto, and we're putting the sword back in the saya, sometimes it got stuck, like the blade was cutting into the saya or that it was tight somewhere. I think the smallness of the saya as well as the steepness of the curve, lots of steepness and snurnesses, caused the blade basically to bind up a little bit. Now I think that would probably clear up over time as you use it and draw it and sheath it several times, but it is noted that it kind of bound up on me a little bit, and that was unexpected. Not something that was terribly pleasant to deal with, but I'd hope that would remedy itself over time. If not, then it would be very uncomfortable to have a brand new saya made. But you can see even here as I try to put the sword back in, you just have to get it just right, and it binds up a little bit. Not something that I would have expected. That's one of those details that I think got missed, and not something I experienced on the Lotus Katana either. So maybe it's this one, maybe it's the humidity, maybe the tolerances are so close that when I got around to doing it, it changed. But right now it's winter, and it's pretty dry inside my house, so I don't know if maybe it warped a little on the inside. I'm not sure, but that is the main downside that I had, is that it binds a little bit when I'm doing noto, but that would also probably correct itself a bit over time as you wear the inside of the saya down, or wherever it's binding. As you repeatedly draw it, it would kind of wear that spot a little bit. Other than that, everything else on the blade is really tip-top. The only downsides, other than the aforementioned binding, is that I'd like to see a little bit more detail. I don't know why the Ocean Katana is the same price as this, has similar features, but they have more carving in the Fuchikashira. I expect a little bit more adornment when you're talking about a $2,800 production sword. It's also competing with blades that in this price range are usually all folded or made out of a special kind of alloy steel, or have some other kind of claim to fame, or some other type of feature set that commands the price. And this is a 1075 mono steel. That means it's not folded, it's not laminated, but many of the other swords in that price are either L6 or they're a Sanmai construction. They're folded and laminated in some way. And this is pretty plain Jane. So I hope that that information is at least helpful to me. I think that this blade is got its footing for practitioners. I mean, so many of these little things start to make sense as you practice a martial art. I don't know how valuable they are as a collector to see that these transitions are similar, but when you hold it in your hand and you're drawing it, and everything kind of fits together as it should, binding it, being the exclusion of that, the way it feels in your hand, the way it balances, the way it moves, how it disassembles and reassembles, all of those things come together and provide an experience that from a practitioner standpoint is very, very comfortable. As a collector though, I don't know, I mean, these are a limited edition, so maybe that drives you. It does have a kind of classic look to a katana with a little bit of flair with the samegawa, but otherwise, black silk, white samegawa, kind of black looking sword. Maybe you want something that's just well done and has this look, but from a collector standpoint, it seems like there's a lot of other things that you could get that have a little bit more panache than this. So I don't know that I could necessarily recommend it unless the attention to detail is something that you appreciate in your collection, in which case it's really tough to beat this from any other production sword that I've seen. And I've seen other high-end Hanweis and MAS and Dynasty Forge and all of those other manufacturers, and none of them have really done the execution on attention to detail, how things fit together, the fit and finish, as well as Citadel has. I really think that this sword is fantastic, and barring the one issue that I noted, there's really nothing else for me to complain about aside from personal preference stuff or the way that I would like to see things done. But honestly, everything else that I have is a quim on, personal complaints about shit that I would have a little bit different. But that's the thing you get when you have a mass-produced sword, is it is kind of what it is, and you can't really change those the same way you can when you're working with the smith before the sword is born, so to speak. Now that said, very solid sword, and I hope that this review provided you some sort of context. I know I didn't cut with the sword. I don't intend to. I know this sword is not quite the right size for me. I'm really tempted to keep it just because it's so damn cool, but I'm probably going to end up selling it, which is why I'm not actually cutting with it. Though the overall look and feel and how it moves and the shape of the blade and how sharp it is, I would not have any pause cutting hard targets with this sword. Bamboo, stalks, whatever it might be, if it's meant to actually be cut, or something that's plausible to cut with a sword, obviously not a tank or something, but if it is something that is plausible, whether it be tatami mats with bamboo cores, I wouldn't hesitate to use this sword on it. I think that it would handle that type of cutting medium functionally and just fine, provided obviously swords are subject to break. I'm not saying it's invincible, but I wouldn't hesitate to use this sword in the same realm of hard target cutting. It is stout, so I don't know that it's a light trick cutty kind of sword, but at the same time, if you want to cut water bottles or something with it, it certainly would handle that as well. On any note, that is all I have for you. I hope you found the review mildly helpful, semi-entertaining, or got something out of it. I know it took a while for me to get her done, so I hope it had all the info you want. If you do have any questions, please throw them in the commentary below, and I will do my best to address them as I can. And that's really all I have for you. Cheers, and thanks for watching. Fantastical, and I'm going to try this again. Or if it is, I love swords because they are so cool. And I can't sing, so I should probably not post this to YouTube. Oh, shit. Okie dokie. It's bedtime in the Jensen house, and there's a lot of screaming. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if the mic is picking it up. They might just be voices in my head. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure I have a family. I'm pretty sure it's bedtime, and I'm pretty sure they're screaming. If there's not, I probably need help. Fuck. All right, now it's time for me to go on about the rambling of every little thing. And forgive, fuck. That is that it doesn't show. Fucking A, god damn it! Go to bed! Very good. I'm really wandering with my thoughts today. Shit on it you like folded laminated steel and get the same fucking. I'm just not in the mood to do this anymore today. But may not be worth it to you. So hopefully that helps. I'm gonna have to record this whole thing again.